Hello humans! Today I wanted to talk about this guy right here. So this is a Buck 359. I'm sure it has a different name. This came as part of a box set way back in the day. It was called the Liner Lock collection. And it was this, and there was a slightly smaller knife that wasn't a flipper thumb stud, just thumb studs, and a very similar anodized aluminum handle, and 420 HC blade. I'm not entirely sure what these things cost new, but it couldn't have been very much. This is a Chinese-made Buck. It's pretty damn simple. It's got a hollow ground blade, 420 HC, like I said. It has dual-use thumb studs and flipper tab. The action is not great. You can get it pretty consistently off of the thumb studs. The flipper tab, it's a little bit weak. The detent takes a little bit to get used to. And because it has, I want to say Teflon, but it's probably nylon washers, cheap plastic washers in there, the action can get pretty springy. It takes quite a bit to get it even somewhat dialed in. And so I got this secondhand, obviously. I got this for $10 secondhand Canadian. Did that not lock out? Oh no, it did. I got this for $10 secondhand. And the previous owner actually stripped out the front pivot screw, which is kind of annoying. T6 is all around. Is it T6 all around, or is it T8 in the front? I actually don't remember. It might be T8 in the front, and then T6 is for the body screws. This is T8. Yeah, that's what it is. So it's T8 for the pivot, which is good. T6 for the body screws, which is kind of rough, but not the end of the world. There's two main reasons I wanted to talk about this. First thing first, this is a very inexpensive knife that, because it was sold as part of a tin, probably was valuated at, like, I don't know, the tins nowadays are like $70. They go on sale for like $45. This was at minimum 10 to 15 years ago, so rough estimate, this knife was probably worth about $15 to $20 new. According to Buck, which I don't necessarily agree with, but there you go. 420 HC blade, which is fine. It's made in China, which is about what you can expect at this range. It is an inset liner lock. Buck really likes their inset liner locks, and you can actually see it does lead to a kind of a clean profile, but there is a couple things that I really hate about the way they did their inset liner lock here. The first one is actually this sort of finger groove right here. Now, good things. The scale is cut below the liner, which is nice because it gives you good access. But the thing that I actually really hate about this is because of the way that this inset space was cut, it's really easy to get your thumb pinched. Especially if you're trying to like fidget with it. I very routinely pinch my thumb at the bottom of that, and it tears at your thumb quite a bit. This whole knife is actually very aggressive. There's lots of sharp corners, sharp angles on it, especially the spine is extremely sharp, as is all of the jimping. But that coupled just with that pinch point right there makes this a deeply uncomfortable knife to use, which is kind of unfortunate. Because I think with a little bit of care, this could have been a winner for Buck. So here's a few things that I personally would want to switch up. First thing first, don't make this a false pocket clip slot. Just drill the two fucking holes. Make this a usable pocket clip area, just so you can have left-handed people carry the knife a little bit easier. There's literally no reason not to. Secondly, either knock this corner down, so essentially extend this pocket just a little bit over the bump to make it a little bit easier to manipulate, or raise, so stop the liner lock access like 2 or 3 jumps further. You have to get really close behind the blade then in order to manipulate this knife, but it would prevent you from getting pinched back there. So I would do one of those two things. I would probably extend it a little bit just to make it a little bit easier to manipulate. Thirdly, phosphor bronze or bearings. Phosphor bronze or bearings in the pivot just make the action so much smoother, make it so much more reliable. It would remove the little bit of side-to-side play that you get, which is just endemic of plastic washers of any sort. They get really bad for that. And I would just ever so slightly knock the edges down. Other than that, this is actually pretty nice theory. This this makes it unusable in my opinion. But as far as designs go, you have really good thumb access. The blade is very much in line with your thumb, which makes it really good for puncturing tasks and cutting tasks. Your belly is very accessible. You can even, like if you're going to use this kind of like a steak knife, you've got a good spot to put your finger, and it's actually really easy to use and manipulate. This is a very easy and approachable knife to use, which I think is really, really good. Access to thumb studs is great. Access to the lock bar is good. Even like the flipping tab, if it was a little bit better tuned, if it was set up in such a way that it wasn't horrible to use, this could be really nice. Hollow ground blade, which makes it good for slicing. I'm not going to test the edge on this because I did get it secondhand and there is quite a bit of evidence of it having been sharpened. So testing the edge wouldn't necessarily tell us a whole hell of a lot. Same issue with doing a puncture test or anything of that sort. I am going to do some size comparisons real quick, however. So here it is next to the Civivi Chevalier and the Wii Banter. Chevalier, Banter. As you can see, it is ever so slightly longer than the Wii Banter, which means that it is what I would consider to be a medium-sized knife. It is certainly on the smaller side of a medium-sized knife, but you do still get a decent amount of presence in the hand with it, which I think is pretty impressive, and I do think is worth noting. Here it is next to a Buck 110 and a Zippo. As you can see, it is quite a bit smaller than the Buck 110. Let's do some closed. Again, I pinched my freaking finger there. So it is actually contoured in the handles, which you'd think would make this very, very comfortable. And generally speaking, it does, but there's just so many sharp points on this knife that make it uncomfortable, that even with that little bit of contouring and like the care that they added to some of the details, this thing still sucks to hold and manipulate. Which sucks. It's really unfortunate because where they paid attention, they did, generally speaking, a really good job. It's just the places that were overlooked or cut because they'd be expensive to fix really did ruin this knife. It's essentially the same thickness as a Zippo. Like it's very, very close there, which is fine. Yeah, I mean, this is a difficult one for me because this is an okay idea executed very poorly, in my opinion. I don't think you should seek these out. I don't really think there's much of a point in picking one up, even if you do see it, because there's better knives with similar ideas out there. Way, way better, right? But if they cared a little bit more, 420HC is not a great blade steel, but it's not a blade steel that I'm going to attack or dig on particularly because it works. It does what it says on the tin. Right? It's a very okay entry-level steel. Redesign this a little bit, knock down the edges, make this, just this liner access a little bit better so it's not as pinchy in the hand. Actually make it usable, make the pocket clip reversible like you've indicated you should be able to. Leave the aluminum, leave the 420HC, and genuinely, I think you have a nice entry-level knife on your hands. It's small enough I'd be comfortable giving this to, you know, like an 8 or a 9-year-old without worrying about it being oversized for their hands or anything like that, but it's still comfortable in my hands at 20-whatever years old. So, yeah, I think this is very much a knife that was let down by the execution of its design. And I think in many ways it's endemic of sort of the problems with making a product for the purpose of having it be limited release, because it doesn't matter how poorly or how well designed this knife was, it was always going to be for a limited release run, which means it never really mattered. People were going to buy it, buck collectors were always going to buy it. Like, I bought it, right? This thing's been out of production for however long. I picked one up because it was a buck that I'd never seen before, and I do like collecting buck knives. It's about 107,000, which, honestly, that's pretty slicey. Let me finish my thing about limited production, then I'll get into use and performance. So, my issue with this being limited production is, a lot of times with limited production, you know that it's going to get sold out. You're targeting a price point, you're targeting an audience that's buying for the sake of collecting, right? Which means there are times when especially companies that are like entry level in the enthusiast space, will make something at a much lower standard because of the fact that it is limited release, because they know that it's going to sell out to the people who collect them. So it's made to a lower standard, and that's really, really unfortunate in my opinion, because this has the lines of a good knife, right? I genuinely think there's one or two little production things that if you fixed, you could sell this as a standalone knife. The blade to handle ratio isn't great. Like, the handle's a decent amount longer than the blade, but in a performance headspace, that doesn't matter all that much. And it is like a fairly slicey knife. You've got a hollow grind, you have a fairly good hollow grind. It feels good to use, it slices well, it punctures well. It's a very natural knife to use because of just, again, like my big thing right now is the line from the top of my thumb to the tip of the blade is just about perfect, which means this is a very easy knife to use through big cuts. Same thing, if I use the tip of my finger, if I'm using this like a steak knife, the top of my finger to the tip of the blade is an extremely straight line. That's not something you get with a lot of knives. Even fairly good knives like the Buck 110, right? It can be cumbersome to use as a steak knife because of the fact that you don't have that nice clean line. What this is good for is getting in and doing detail work, really and truly. Your belly is very far out, whereas with this you have a longer belly. Despite the fact that it has a much smaller blade than the 110, the belly is essentially the same length, right? And that's hugely beneficial for a lot of those EDC or precision purposes. You've got really good access to the tip. I do think that if they gave a shit, this would be a really good knife. Unfortunately, they didn't give a shit, and it kind of shows. I wouldn't necessarily recommend going out and trying to find one of these. I mean, it is slicey. It's an okay knife, but there's so much better that you can get out there. It just, yeah, it kind of sucks. It's been a while since I've talked about like a truly budget buck knife. But this definitely falls in the category of somebody who cared design it and somebody who didn't care design the manufacturing specifications, which is too bad. It's cool. I'm happy to have it in my collection. I wouldn't recommend other people go out and find it, but it is what it is. Stay safe and have fun out there. Peace.